Hello horror hounds, welcome to my horror house. Now, Longlegs, easily the most hyped horror film since Hereditary. I got to see it last night, and does it live up to the hype? For my money, for the most part, yes, with some lingering doubts. It's definitely stayed with me. It stayed with me all through the night. I'm still thinking about it this morning. Very briefly, the story is about Lee Harker, played by Maika Monroe, who is an investigator in the FBI, young female investigator who gets drawn into a decades-long investigation of a series of family murders that all look like murder-suicides, that all look like one person in the family has killed everyone else, then committed suicide, but for the fact that every single crime scene has a letter written in ciphers, kind of Zodiac killer-like, and all signed Longlegs. So there's a signature to all of these crime scenes, these murder scenes, that seem to imply the hand of an outside force, a person who calls themselves Longlegs. So far, so Silence of the Lambs. Longlegs definitely leans on a lot of the visual language of Silence of the Lambs. The writer-director Osgood Perkins has been very clear that this was his intention. It's set in the 1990s, round about the same time as Lambs. Clearly, it's very difficult to watch a film about a young green FBI agent joining in a manhunt for a mysterious serial killer and not think Silence of the Lambs. So I think the instinct to lean into it rather than shy away from it is a good one. The colour palette is very reminiscent of Silence of the Lambs. It's very muted. It's set sort of end of autumn, start of winter time, so it's got that bleak austerity to it running all the way through. You can feel the cold in this movie in a very similar way as you can feel it in Silence of the Lambs. But that familiarity with a previous film is sort of like a stealth injection to get you into a story that then goes off in a completely different direction. It gets you comfortable with the language of the film, and you think you sort of know where you are with all the moving pieces. But this isn't Silence of the Lambs. This does have a supernatural element to it, and I'll be honest, that's probably the bit I struggle with the most, is that potentially the least satisfying element of Longlegs, because the explanation there is a supernatural one, and therefore once all the pieces are put into the puzzle, it is potentially less scary as a result. I can still find the notion of a Buffalo Bill extremely scary because these people exist in real life in one form or another, whereas up to a certain point, your Longlegs don't. While I was on the ride, I was completely on board, because this is one of those films that takes you into the heart of a weird mystery. Something is off from the start, something's off kilter, will take you to a resolution. And I think possibly where this film falls down is that there is an absolute definite resolution. It is completely and utterly spelt out to you what is going on in this movie, in a very similar way to the very, very end of Hereditary, where a character literally explains what's happening in the entire movie. I think that potentially hurts it, given that this is the story that Osgood Perkins wanted to tell, supernatural elements and all. How well does it do with the job it sets out to do? I'll be honest, extremely well. Extremely well. The opening scene with a little girl meeting Nicolas Cage's Longlegs is one for the ages. It sets this weird, creepy, uneasy tone right from the start. The conversation is already starting on social media as to whether this film is scary or not. And your mileage is obviously going to vary. People are different. Some people will find it scary, some people won't find it scary. What this film doesn't have is jump scares, and that's a 2 big thumbs up from me. What it has in place of jump scares is this growing sense of unease and dread. a lot like Hereditary. Strangely enough, the more I sort of talk about it out loud, the more I think there are parallels between Hereditary and Longlegs beyond just the fantastic ad campaigns that hyped both of these films up as the must-watch horror movie of that year. Nicolas Cage is genuinely creepy as Longlegs, not just in with what he brings to the table, but how Perkins chooses to film and edit him. For the longest time, you don't see his face. His face is almost a threat that's held over you. Just as his face comes into frame, it's a technique I don't think I've ever seen before. But it just holds off on his character and holds off and holds off and holds off all the time, suggesting that no, this is too much for you to see. No, you can. No, you can't. We've got to go somewhere else now. It's such an effective lo-fi technique. And what Cage does with his the little trills and the featheriness of his voice and his mannerisms and the energy he gives off, which is, I was really heartened. I just before I started recording this, watched an interview with him talking about his process for Longlegs. Nicolas Cage's acting process and the thinking behind it is always fascinating. So if you ever get a chance to hear him talk about it, click on that video. But he said he was channeling his mother and wanted to give the character sort of masculine and feminine energy and give it an androgynous quality. And I'm so glad he said that, because there are times in this movie where I was thinking, is this character a woman or a man? Ultimately, it doesn't matter. He's under a lot of makeup, which will either work for you or not. For me, it absolutely did work. The closest it brings to mind, if I can give you a sort of reference point, is the hag mask that the killer in the amazing slasher film Curtains uses. If you know that image, and if that gives you chills, then I think Cage in Longlegs will also give you chills. But for me, the other standout role is Alicia Witt, who plays Maika Monroe's mother. It is an outstanding performance. There are some images towards the end in the final act of this movie which I just think genuinely scary, genuinely horrible. There are just looks and ways lines are delivered that just got under my skin and shivered me. So without going into spoilery detail, whilst there are elements in this story that I am always going to bang up against. Being obtuse about it, the metal balls, huh? What? Okay. Even though everything is explained at the end, I'm still there going, really? Okay. That's possibly something for me to come round to, because there's so much good here. The look of it, the sound of it, the editing is amazing. Projecting the sense of evil and dread and not having to rely on bangs and booms and crashes is a masterful skill, and I definitely now want to go back and watch some of Osgood Perkins' previous films. There will be people who laugh at Cage's performance in this, as they do most, if not all, of his performances, and they are wrong. They are on absolutely the wrong side of history. After all these years, Cage gives us something else, something new, something weirdly uncanny, an energy I've never seen from him before, a character we've kind of never seen before. Longlegs will definitely go down in history as one of the great cinematic serial killers, alongside the likes of Jamie Gumb and John Doe from Seven. Absolutely no question. But the secret MVP of the film for me is Alicia Witt. It is creepy. It is definitely spooky. It's hung about in my head. Watch it with the lights out. It's not a party film. Don't get the beers in. Don't get the snacks in. If you've got a group of friends who are serious about engaging seriously with the cool new horror film on the block, Longlegs. And if you're still here at the end, thank you. If you're a fan of horror, you might want to check out my collection of horror short stories, 17 Stories of Death and Desire. The Amazon links will be in the pinned comment below. check it out.
I bid you welcome.
I welcome you to my house.
Welcome to my house.
Welcome to my home.